Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I've got a full house. Welcome tonight, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What's good, guys?
We are back today showing some love to other European leagues, discussing any standout storylines or players so far this season. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The first league that we're gonna start off with is, of course, the Serie A. A lot happening in this league, and from recent times, there's a lot more, I would say, to neutrals, a lot more entertaining with a lot of different teams taking over and looking like they could go all the way. But I guess I'll toss it to you first, Gio. What's taken you by surprise, if anything, from Serie A this year?
Um, how well Inter has just started. In terms of Serie A, obviously, Lukaku, obviously throughout the summer has kind of gone on and off about going back to Inter, but obviously we know now he's rejoined Serie A on a different squad, and that is Roma. Joined forces with Jose Mourinho. And hey, honestly, surprising choice to me because of how Jose kind of likes to play. Very, very defensive when he does get the ball. No, when he does play with the lead. So I'm surprised he did choose to go there. But honestly, it seems like, losing Lukaku wasn't big for Inter. They've clicked on, a different level. And obviously, if I have to say another team that's, kind of shocking me right now is Juve. Obviously, with the shaky season they've had last year, amongst other problems they're having this year, they're playing surprisingly well. Players are starting to get healthy again, and it seems like things are rolling for them again. So seeing the bigger teams do their thing and kind of flex their muscles again is quite nice. It's quite nice. Although Italian football hasn't been what it used to be and what we've appreciated of the past, it's still very entertaining now.
Yeah, for sure. Inter, like you said, starting quite well, but of course it's AC Milan that is leading the Serie A table right now. But I actually want to echo that thought. I think Inter has started well, and of course they did lose Romelu Lukaku. He went back to Chelsea, his parent club, but they have signed Marcus Thuram, who is, if I'm not mistaken, leading in terms of the assists, 5 assists so far, with Lautaro Martinez having 10 goals. So great start from that partnership up there. It seems like they're a team that constantly has a two up top, which is something that we don't necessarily see often in in many teams, I would say, especially at the top there. But Lautaro Martinez has had a great start to the season, and I'm interested to see how he does moving forward as well. But yeah, Mac, anything that sort of stands out to you?
From specifically in Inter Milan, I think you both kind of nailed it on the head in terms of how well they've started off. A little bit of surprise. Do not that they started off well, but that they started off this well. I think that it's more if you take a step back and kind of look at this year, I'd say, well, right now the first thing that actually shocks me, I know it's a quick move on, but is Napoli. From being kind of the cream of the crop last year, everybody's second favorite team, to go now where it feels like kind of they're sputtering in terms of how their performance has gone. Of course, their manager Spalletti had moved on. I think he coaches now the Italian national team, and they moved on to a new manager, Rudy Garcia. And it looks like he's probably going to be let go in the near future as well, from most recent reports. So if they're having a change of management, links have been to they've looked like they wanted to target Luis Enrique, stealing loan from PSG. There's reports of course, Chelsea legend Graham Potter taking over that job as well, maybe going abroad and pulling a David Moyes after having a horrible stint in one of the bigger clubs in England to go abroad and see if he can kind of reset his career. I think for them, because they are a team right now where I feel like there could be a lot of potential changes going on. considering the incident with Victor Osimhen, Kvaratskhelia has not played as well this far this year, in my opinion. Only has a goal and a couple assists, so he's definitely not hit his highs yet. Where if either of those players feel upset and you slowly start to see more pieces of the puzzle being moved out of Napoli over the course of the next couple seasons and other teams pillaging them to help for their benefit. Most recently, the impact, of course, of Kim going to Bayern Munich, who's kind of immediately stepped in and looks like kind of their leading center half on that team. And they done well, and we'll talk about them later. But I think the biggest thing that stands out is, like I said, the drop-off of Napoli in Serie A specifically. And the reason why I think that in some ways it's good, it creates excitement because now we have these other teams, if it be AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juventus, other teams around them that could potentially still challenge for the title. And still potentially have this Napoli team chase them down if they can kind of get their act together. They're not too far off of it right now, sitting on 14 points, I think it is, with first place being in 17. So 7 points already after 8 games. It's a lot, but it's not impossible to overcome. But they do definitely need to start getting their act together. So that's the first biggest takeaway for me when we're talking about Serie A.
Okay, Napoli, of course, a team that a lot of people will have eyes on, considering how well they did last season. Gio, does it surprise you, I guess, how they have been doing, or is it more so like the other teams, the likes of, Juventus bouncing back, like you kind of mentioned earlier, Inter Milan, and also AC Milan, who I gotta admit, I didn't expect the likes of Christian Pulisic, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, among others in that AC Milan team, even Luka Jovic, who signed not too long ago, to be pulling the strings for that team, that AC Milan team, and bringing them to first place. Do you think it's a little bit sort of too soon to call the league at the moment, just because it is this early? I just want to read out a couple of the next fixtures for AC Milan for you. They are in first place right now, but they do face Juventus on October 22nd, so after the international break. Then they have PSG in the Champions League, Napoli in the Serie A, then they face Udinese, and then they face AC Milan, PSG again in the Champions League. Is it for them, Milan, Gio, is it a matter of like what we're sort of talking about with Newcastle, where they're starting well, or we hope that they start well, because when the Champions League comes back and they are in that tough group, things are going to sort of even out for them? What are your thoughts there?
I do think they're going to even out. I think they still, right now, because yes, they are top of the table in the league, but I think they still have a lot of focus on the Champions League and how much effort they decide to put in the Champions League in the next coming group stage matches is really reflective. It's going to show how much effort they can still put into the league. I know it's early on, but these early points where teams are still trying to figure themselves out is where you can really salvage points and scrape away points that later in the season you might lose, whether it be injuries or anything like that, or whether you want to rest players and things of that nature. So they're in a good position. It's not a bad position to be in by any means, but I think because they lost, players like Tonali and things of that nature, and yes, they added Pulisic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek, but I think if they want to continue to be considered huge threats in the league and hold that 1-2 position and still make a dent in the Champions League, it looks like, I know it's early to say, but I think they will be looking to add in January. But you just for squad depth, but I think they have a very good chance. But I know Inter is knocking on the door, and depending on what Juve can do in January, due to their lack of midfield, we can touch on that later. They can really make a push as well.
Should we start talking about Juve, Mac? Considering, of course, they are in third place, but there is a headline, I think, coming out recently. One of their star players, Paul Pogba, has had his second sample tested positive again for testosterone in his sort of system, and it's been sort of talked about that he may have his contract terminated. I know that reports come out that in his contract he was supposed to be earning, I think, around 8 million a year. He's right now earning just 42,000 euros a year, and in his salary, and so what do you think that situation would look like for Juve and even the French national team, Mac, if Pogba, who is 30 years old at the time of recording, is no longer part of Juventus in the near future?
It's going to be a tough outlook for France in particular because his midfield. Well, okay, sorry to take a step back. France, they're not going to have any problem. They have so much depth across all the midfield positions. They're not necessarily going to miss him if he doesn't appear. So I would not worry about that. The likelihood, if you care about Paul Pogba's international career, that's still coming back around. I think you should be worried about that if you're a fan of him, where that door may be closed forever. At least for right now, going into the Euros this coming summer. I would be surprised if he were to partake in it, especially if he's on a suspension, then has to come back and then potentially fight his way back into a squad. So I feel like that's a little bit more dubious. I think if we were to take a look at this Juventus team, right now, for me, even though we've talked a lot about AC, Inter, Napoli, those are still my three, kind of the top three, if you would ask me of who would finish within the top three within Serie A, but that fourth spot really is still up for grabs. They have a young team right now. They have a lot of unknown qualities, I would say, where who name one player that you kind of irrecoverably trust in this team to be able to put in a good shift. Vlahovic, maybe. Szczesny as a goalkeeper is decent. There's not anyone else, I'll say, on the team that is above grade. Yes, maybe Serie A, the quality isn't there, but a lot of these other teams, I think, at least have like the 1 or 2 star or game-breaking type of players, where I don't feel that you have that from Juve at the moment. Pogba could have been that type of player if he's on his good form of what he's done some days he's played for Manchester United when, he was allowed to play in the correct position, or even previously when he played for Juventus. So I think that he could have been that type of player. So it is very disappointing that this did happen because this Juventus team does need, like I said, that type of player. But yeah, it's a tough look overall. I don't want to talk in just quickly, just as a side. I'm completely disregarding Fiorentina, maybe to a certain point of disrespect, where for me, they're not really kind of a third place team that I would be worried about right now, challenging for that in that spot. Because again, for me, it's that top 3 in that 4th spot. I'm very skeptical on them because they've just, in my opinion, been very fortunate thus far this year in terms of their expected goal difference of, let's say, if your expected goals positive minus your expected goals against, they're actually in a negative 1.3. So they don't create a lot of chances. So they've been very fortunate in capitalizing those. And they have been fortunate in terms of not allowing a lot of goals against them. Is that to their credit by assuming that, oh yeah, this team is so clinical and their goalkeeper and defense are so strong that they're able to stop those chances? No, there's no pedigree in that. So I am calling hard bullshit on terms of their position right now in the league table. So I wouldn't be surprised if Napoli are kind of in shambles, Napoli's not in shambles, Juventus is still going through a cycle, that they still finish comfortably inside the top 4 if things do break even. It really comes down to maybe does Atalanta sneak in there. I don't see it, but I think that if all things being equal, it'll probably be an all Milan affair, which is fun for whenever we make a podcast and need to put on a table, right, boys? Content first.
Of course, that makes it easy for us all around. But I guess same question for you, Gio. Of course, Paul Pogba having ties to your club, Manchester United. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Definitely tough. Obviously, we don't know the exact details of how it is in his system, things of that nature. But yeah, no, I think it's kind of almost downhill from here. It's been downhill since his return to Manchester United. If we're being completely honest, like Matt kind of mentioned, where does he really go from here? Is his country obviously a World Cup winner? But is he gonna make a return for France? Is he gonna make a return in Serie A or any top European league at this point? Look, he's aging. He's going to be on the wrong side. I'm pretty sure he's on the wrong side of 30 now. So, no club is really going to pay top dollar for that. Does he kind of, what do you call it? Get the bag and knock on those Saudi doors, could be, or those Qatari doors, join Coutinho out there. Who knows? But I think his career will continue. Where it'll be, less likely in Europe, maybe in America, maybe in, obviously, like I said, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, those types of leagues. But yeah, I think he'll still make a good living off of it. But for him to be considered in a top European club is going to be very tough right now because after not performing again for Man United. Injury ridden as soon as he touched, as soon as he walked through those Juve doors, and then to come back, and then for this to happen is just bad news on top of bad news, and it couldn't get any worse.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate seeing a player of that quality, because even though, things haven't gone his way in recent years, we all, I think, can all agree that he does have that quality. And if he is in sort of top shape, top of his game, definitely walks into that Juve midfield that it consists of currently Manuel Locatelli, Adrian Rabiot, who is his compatriot at France, and also Weston McKennie, who was relegated with Leeds last season. So of course he should comfortably walk into that squad. No disrespect to Weston there, but also one could argue, looking at the French squad that was announced, you have the likes of Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Fofana, Kamara, and Rabiot as the midfielders that were picked by Deschamps. But I think there is space for him in that midfield, and if he does make a comeback, I wouldn't be surprised that he does feature maybe in upcoming tournaments. Just because, of course, France have sort of moved into a strong defense, a workhorse of midfield, and then just star power up front. He could be sort of that extra piece that brings France to unlock really stubborn defenses in deep in tournaments, and so that could be interesting to see moving forward if he could potentially make his comeback there. But yeah, I do agree with you, Gio, not liking the chances of that. And with the likes of I guess the recent moves to Saudi Arabia by a lot of top European players a little bit past their prime, I wouldn't be surprised if he falls in that manner. But I guess lastly, before we move on from this from the Serie A chat, I did want to ask, I guess I'll toss it to you first, Mac, about our favorite manager, Jose Mourinho, and how he's doing at Roma. Currently not doing the hottest, but he has Lukaku, and Lukaku is, if I'm not mistaken, still part of the leading scorers. There are 5 goals so far this year. We weren't expecting too much from him, considering how things were talked about from him staying at Chelsea until sort of the very last minute. But with Jose Mourinho, any team that he puts out, he's gonna want sort of that quality. And can he be sort of the man to rejuvenate Lukaku's career, considering he is, like you mentioned, pushing in terms of age, and he might be for himself as well, looking to settle at a club before he calls it quits in the coming years. What are your thoughts on how Roma's been doing so far?
Roma's in a very interesting spot because for me, they very much seem like the Lost Island and misfit toys in some way, where you see players that had been linked to with great potential, if it be Dybala, if it be Lukaku, other players like that, where on different situations, maybe in a different universe or a different multiverse potentially, that this player's career could have turned out completely differently. But they just landed at Roma or with Jose, and he's a very unique style manager, as we know. But again, I think that they're very much, I could see any situation for them, and I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the season if they are that potentially that fourth team to finish aside a Champions League spot. Or are they similar to kind of how, let's be honest, how Jose Mourinho's teams have finished his career, his last season in any team that he's coached did not generally go well. And could that be this year for Roma? So I could see any type of outcome coming from this team, and I wouldn't be surprised, because you can have, from a game-to-game individual kind of performance level, we could have so many variables and so many different drastic measures where you don't know on what side of the spectrum that they're going to be able to land on. So if I'm a Roma fan, I am very distressed just day to day in terms of living life, because I don't know what I'm going to get. I have no idea. So if you'd be honest, if you wanted me to be honest about my opinion, all I can do is kind of blind myself and throw a dart at the dartboard and try to guess where they'll finish off. Again, for me, if you were to ask me how I feel like they're going to kind of progress for the rest of the year, they do need to have a good season from Lukaku, Dybala, El Shaarawy. I think those are probably the 3 key attackers that I'm looking at as like, okay, can we get something more consistent out of that as a front 3 potentially? Or kind of maybe if someone else is joining on the wing and having Dybala as a 10, but we have good enough midfield to where Jose Mourinho is content and happy on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, so many questions. I'm not predicting to finish inside the top 4, which then, in all likelihood, in my opinion, will probably spell the end of Jose Mourinho at Roma, because there have been links to him, which was one of the funny links talking about Napoli earlier, is that there was reports that they were looking at him too, which would be hilarious because that is just the complete opposite of what they were doing. So again, there's so much going on, which I wouldn't be surprised if this is where we potentially have curtains for Jose Mourinho at Roma.
I don't disagree with you, sorry, Mac. Definitely could go south for him in the league, but one thing is for certain, Gio, they are in the Europa League, 2 wins out of 2 so far, and competition that they, at this stage of his sort of managerial career, Jose Mourinho will be targeting trophies, and if he could make this team similar to West Ham in the Premier League last year, where they didn't do so hot in the Premier League, but they held on and did everything right in the Europa League. Could that be a way for him to sort of not necessarily just extend his contract, but cement himself as, one of those famous Roma managers? What do you think there, Gio?
I think they very well could be. They were in the final last year, were they not? Right. I think Jose is a very smart manager in which he knows what he wants and how to prioritize. And when he doesn't get what he wants, say for example, if they were to not perform in the league or Europa League, and things kind of go south, injuries start to happen, he has been begging for backup. He's been begging for depth. He's been begging for, and he's blatantly come out and said it. I don't get what these other big clubs get. They don't give me an open wallet to spend, like some of these other clubs and other managers get. And he's been very open about it, which a lot of times is true. Look, it is Roma. You're not going to, nobody's really lining up to play for Roma, as they are other clubs to play in the Champions League. But, he does have a decent squad, but does he need depth? Absolutely. So I think Jose has a good, excuse in his back pocket ready. Teams know he's a fantastic manager, so I wouldn't be surprised if Napoli came and kind of knocked on the door to kind of gauge his interest. He understands the game well. Napoli, for one, have decent squad depth. Obviously, they lost Kim, to Bayern Munich, but I still think they, on paper, they still have a better squad than Roma. But I wouldn't like him to go to Napoli simply because I don't think he'll use, Casciavilli. Am I pronouncing his name wrong?
Casciavilli.
Casciavilli, and Victor Osimhen, to their full potential. Just because he is such a structured manager, likes to hold the box when they're in the lead. I'm surprised they scored 4 in that Europa League match they played last. So honestly, I think Roma's not in a bad position. I think it can go both ways. He can really focus attention on Europa League, but he can also focus attention on, the league. But I think his main focus will be to win a trophy, and his best chance to win a trophy is going to be Europa League.
Yeah, I agree as well. But that sort of wraps up our little coverage of the Serie A so far. So we're going to take a break here, boys, and then we'll be back covering some of the action that we've seen in La Liga so far. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now discussing the action from La Liga. And of course, we're going to talk about Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico. But firstly, we have to go straight to it, Mac. Girona, a team that's been taking us a lot by surprise. What have you seen from them so far?
Overall, you got to give them absolutely a ton of credit in terms of how well they played in regards to ending up the league position. I have a couple quick questions before I guess I give my individual take on them as a team. Just be able to ask my co-host. This team has been around playing professional football and has been established as a club and playing at least in the top 5 divisions in kind of Spanish football since 1933-34 season. How many seasons in total do they think they've played in the Division 1, which would now be La Liga? Take a wild guess.
20.
Okay, Ray, you're going with 20? Gio, go ahead. What about you?
Let's.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
South of that number, south of 20.
Let's go with 13.
4. This is their 4th full season in the top division. Majority of the time since like 08, 09, they played in the 2nd division. So that means they've only concluded 3 seasons in Serie A in total. Last year, I don't know if you know, I'll give you a little bit of a hint. They got promoted into the Liga and they finished the first full season back in Liga after being relegated in the 2016-17 season. To then, in the 2015-16 season, they were down and they moved back up. So since then, what do you think is their highest place finish in the 1st division with Spanish football?
Highest finish. If they get relegated pretty much every time they come up, I'm going to say 14th.
A little bit higher, Gio, to give you some hint to help out there. A little bit higher.
Okay. I know, because I think I was watching one of their games. I think it was against Real Madrid, actually. And I was watching one of the games, and the announcer said something about Champions League. So for them to play in the Champions League, they would be in the top 4, no?
No. The highest place finish was 10th in the 2017-18 season, and actually last season. And then, of course, in the 2018-19 season, they finished 18th, relegated, went back down, had to come back up. So this is their 2nd year back in a row in the Liga. So if we were to compare and contrast to our world of the Premier League, this is Leicester just wearing Girona colors. This is pretty much what it is and feels like right now for a lot of Liga fans. I think it's a little bit different because you have... I don't even know if Leicester had finished 10th prior to winning the Premier League way back then. At least it never felt like that way to me. They were always kind of that bubble team, but at least a couple of seasons in a row, they were in the Premier League before they made a jump as drastic as they did. So I think that you got to give them full credit. Am I going to immediately start off after kind of giving them props, saying how well they've done in terms of their team and kind of rain on the parade? Absolutely, because in all likelihood, this is not going to continue. The fairy tale is going to end. It's 9 games in the season. Their expected goal difference is slightly a positive, so they've been pretty much average, and every other team around them is absolutely killing it. Barcelona, who are 3rd behind them right now, has a positive expected goal difference of 11.8. Girona, it's 3.3. So it's just, in terms of the averaging out over the course of the season, the expected goals, it's going to be very, 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 very difficult to keep this on trend. I hope it does. I think a team like this, a season like this, definitely spurs in a lot of neutrals and gives a lot of romanticized to the sport in a way where even when some of these better teams, when they're not playing so well, even when they're playing at their peak, don't do the same type of justice, in my opinion. So I would love to see it continue, but I am going to be the first one here. Rain on the parade. It's probably not going to go well. But I think that at least some aspects of their team, it'll be interesting to see what they pick up. Because similarly with Leicester, you saw a lot of teams being more comfortable on terms of the top half of the table, playing more as a defense-first transitional team. That's something going to be where what from this Girona team can people take away? They've had this type of success. There has to be a reason behind it. It can't all be luck. A lot of it can be, but it can't all be luck. What are key tactics we can take away and see what they can do? Because in terms of separation, and I'm going along, I'm almost done. In separation of what happened with Leicester and to compare it with them, where it was really it was Jamie Vardy, Riyad Mahrez, and defense, right? This team is not like that. It's very well balanced where you don't know really kind of where their goals are going to come from, where the highest goal scorer, I think is tied on 3 goals between 2 different players. I think Herrera and Dobrik. So again, we don't know how they're going to play. So is that more of an egalitarian system where managers are now not going to necessarily chase maybe that top end talent that much and try to lower their base and have like a strong link sport team versus trying to sign that big name star? Is that going to more be the change where other teams are going to take away from them? I don't know, but I think it's a fascinating story. It's probably not going to end well, but in the meantime, let's enjoy the fairy tale.
I definitely agree. If there's a team out there, very much like how we picked Napoli last year to be our second favorite team, Girona definitely should be one for those neutrals out there for La Liga. Yeah, out of the sort of 9 matches they've had so far, it is quite interesting that they have been going on such a great run. My only concern is they have been only the likes of essentially, I would say, comfortably bottom half teams. The most notable teams that they faced, Sociedad, they tied. They beat a Sevilla team that's not great at the moment, and they lost to Real Madrid 3-0. Those are really the only standout sort of fixtures that they've had so far. Winning margins for their goals have been really 1 or 2 goals, apart from sort of the Getafe win. And so, yeah, it's great to see a team that it's sort of like a team that any team doesn't want to come and face, but they are always going to give it a tough game at home, definitely, and then see if they can get something away and continue their run of form. So that'll be interesting to see if they can continue that throughout the season. But I guess, Gio, let's talk now about, of course, the big hitters. Real Madrid and Barcelona obviously are going to be chasing down the title this year again. So what's sort of taking you by surprise this season in La Liga?
It's at obviously I know Mac isn't huge on him playing there, but Jude Bellingham obviously is fantastic. But honestly, I think Barca has been looking more cohesive with the new additions. Joao Felix, Joao Cancelo, being able to be more dynamic across the pitch, not just relying heavily on your midfield and your young guys, I think is important. And I think it's still important for them to add to that squad. I think they need a little bit more grit in that squad because they have a lot of finesse players. And sometimes a lot of finesse players get bullied, which can very well be the case. You have to have a couple of guys who's willing to go out there and really go for a challenge, or go stand up for your finesse players. I think a lot of teams have those players, and I just don't think they have enough. So definitely look for them to add to their roster. Hopefully it's not another finesse player, but honestly, La Liga has been extremely entertaining. Of course, like we said, Girona up at second right now. Atleti, who has also been playing quite decent. Champions League, obviously they lost. They lost the lead late against I think it was Lazio. With the goalkeeper header. So honestly, and then now rumors, of course, Diego Simeone, who's gonna extend. He's been there for far too long. Surprised he's still there. Actually, there's so much rumors about him leaving. But yeah, I think we're almost seeing. I hate to use this word parody because it's not really parody, but like more leagues are getting more competitive, where these lower table teams are acquiring talent that necessarily we oversee as football fans, because we only see the bright lights and the big squads. So they're getting these players and they're playing team football, they're playing great football, and it's making leagues interesting. Much to the reason of why we love the Premier League. It's because it's so competitive, and any week in, week out, any team can win. And I'm almost getting that feeling from Serie A, more so in La Liga. But that makes me want to watch it that much more.
Yeah, of course, we all want to be entertained, and so it will be very, I guess, a breath of fresh air if it's not Real Madrid or Barcelona winning the league this year, which brings me back to another potential team that could win it if things go right for them. It's Atletico Madrid. They have, from previous seasons, been up there as one of the top 3 teams in La Liga, and this year it's, I guess, no different for them. They are sitting on 19 points, 6 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie. Joe did mention them a little bit, but I just want to go back to sort of how well I think they started this season. Alvaro Morata with 5 goals, and Joe, I know you want to talk a little bit about this, but Saul Niguez with 5 assists as well, leading the league. And so with the likes of Griezmann and of course the experience that a lot of those Atletico Madrid players bring to that squad, do you think it could be a year where Atletico make a comeback and not necessarily a comeback, but make a push for the title, considering Real Madrid we can all agree, are sort of in a little bit of a transitional period, and Barcelona have, even though they did win the league last year, currently still not, I think, a finished team. So what are your thoughts on that, Mac?
For Atletico Madrid, I think it'll be very tough for them to close the gap in quality to the Barcelonas, to the Real Madrids, just given that I question their offensive capabilities going forward for the rest of the season, where if your main attacking two are a Alvaro Morata, who's on the wrong side of 30, and Antoine Griezmann, who's also on the wrong side of 30, I think that does spell a little bit of doom going into the dog days of the season, where the fixture list is going to pile up. They're going to have to sacrifice other competitions if they're going to be able to make a stronger run in this La Liga competition. So I would be very skeptical in terms of them playing well for the long term. So I'm quite concerned, to be honest, in terms of that look for the season. And I would not be surprised if we start to see a step back from a lot of these players from this team, because there needs to be a large refresh of this team. Their youngest player that they play regularly, I would say, that has at least started, I think that at least started majority of their matches, was Nahuel Molina, Argentina, as the fullback. He's 25 years old. This team makes me feel young. And that's not a great look. You don't want me to feel young in comparison to you guys when I look at this lineup. So I think that I'm very concerned of how this team is going to look by the end of the season. So I do not see them chasing down either of the top two. Again, in all likelihood, they'll probably finish third because they do have that little bit of extra quality. But are they, as they previously were, a threat to the Barcelonas or the Real Madrids, who I think you can both agree is where they are at the finished article, but they can get there. They have the quality to get there. If they just have a couple players come back from injury, like a player like Pedri plays a little bit more consistently for Barcelona. I think he's only played like 2 games so far this season due to injury. So I think a player like that or Real Madrid are able to kind of sort out. Well, no, they don't really have to sort out much. They're playing phenomenally well, but there's no reason why that doesn't continue for them. So I think there is just that tier where Atletico Madrid is the closest to them, but realistically is not knocking on that door. They're comfortably sitting outside. I do want to give my takes though in regards to Barcelona specifically. I think you both very eloquently can explain and give us the pros and cons to everything going on Real Madrid. I'll leave it as where I love to see Jude playing well. He's taking to the team like a duck to water, and only is going to kind of enhance the superstar the more he continues to play like this. I'm interested to see what they do going forward, but that's more so in terms of like next year for him as an individual. Whereas for Barcelona, differently to Atletico Madrid, is where you do see that kind of age difference in the squad, and there probably needs to be a little bit more rebalancing. But what they've done with Ansu Fati going out alone, they're able to feature some of their other players. If it be Lamine Yamal, Gavi, if it even be at a fullback position, Alejandro Balde, players like that are able to come in and immediately play well. It's very, very impressive. But the question would be is that, do they have the financial backing to be able to build around those young players effectively? Because if I'll say one of your leading midfield players, I know it's due to injury, is Romelu, who you both maybe might recall from Premier League action. That's not the greatest look when you're going against a Valverde, Camavinga, Tchouaméni, Jude Bellingham midfield against Real Madrid. So they have a little bit more questions than Madrid there. And the question would be if Pedri comes back, then Romelu, does he just kind of sit on the bench and garners dust, or cobwebs, which I think would be suitable. But if they need to feature players of that quality, not to kind of throw disrespect at him, he's a quality football player, but I think we can all agree he's not that kind of classical level to start regularly. Even though, to be fair though, Barcelona have previously gone away with always having that one token. Maybe he's not there. It's very rarely screams out to me. If you guys remember, I think late 2010s, where Mathieu, the French center back that played for Barcelona, but somehow he always played well. Again, I doubt it's this case. I know I'm going into it a little bit too long, but I think that they still need a little bit more of a refresh around their core young players. But I am happy at the very least that you're seeing more of those players feature, whereas the PKs, the Sergio Busquets, the Jordi Albas, they were taking those spots. Now that they're gone, we can feature the young players, which for me was always my favorite part of Barcelona.
Yeah, I agree. Even seeing, even though he's not that young, Ilkay Gundogan coming in and featuring instead of Romeo sometimes as the holding midfielder, it's a different look to, I guess, what they had before with Busquets as well. So that's interesting to me. But I guess lastly, before we move on, then Gio, who do you got to win the league? I guess the big question. Do you think it benefits more Real Madrid or Barca to win the league this year, and who out of those two would it negatively affect more if they do not win the league? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the real winner here is always going to be Real Madrid, whether they win or lose the league. Now, let me tell you guys why. Barca will attract, you know, that classic footballer who's like, oh yeah, I adore Leo Messi. I want to go play for Barcelona. The classic spiel, right? If Real Madrid loses, splash the cash. Okay, yeah, you guys want to win the league? We're gonna get Mbappe. If they win the league, they're gonna say, look, Mbappe, look what you're missing. Come on in. And they still sign Mbappe. So realistically, who is the real winner here? Real Madrid. Guys, I'm just calling it like I see it. But no, I do genuinely think long term, it's going to be a race between Real Madrid and Barcelona. I just don't think I see Atletico holding their form. Again, there's a lot of players on the wrong side of 30. And then Saul being, an assist leader. He was a player that was loaned out last season because, obviously he couldn't find his form. Is this his form? Even if it is, how long can he hold it for? Is there a reason why Chelsea wasn't able to use him, as much as they wanted? Obviously, I don't think he had a fair shake there, so I'm glad to see him do well. But because they've been on and off for so long, I can't give Atleti that credit to try and win the league. It's gonna be a 2-horse race like it is typically most years. But you know me, this is a biased answer. It's going to be Real Madrid.
Fair. And of course, that's something we're going to watch out for. A team that we haven't, I guess, touched too much on, and so I'll quickly mention it before we wrap up this part, is, of course, Sevilla, who find themselves currently in the Liga. Let me just search it up here. 14th. Not the greatest start for them in the Liga. And, of course, in the Champions League, they are... they tied Lens, and then they also tied PSV. So they are doing their best with Arsenal coming up in the Champions League to drop themselves back into the Europa League and inevitably win it again. So we welcome them, Liverpool fans. We welcome, Sevilla when they drop down to the Europa League, because it is, of course, the best competition in the world. But we're going to leave it at that for now, and we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back touching on the Bundesliga. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to finish off today's podcast now, touching on the Bundesliga and what's going on with them since the start of the season. Of course, there's going to be a lot of eyes on the big money move from Bayern for Harry Kane, him moving over across from Tottenham Hotspur, and of course getting 8 league goals so far in the season. But Gio, anything else stand out to you from the Bundesliga so far this season?
Absolutely. The fact that Bayern is third, and I love it. Anytime, we don't see the top team expected in leagues like this, and by leagues like this, I mean borderline farmers leagues. Hey, it's great to see, honestly, especially because, they made a big splash to cash type move. I think it was leaked, or they said how much they paid for him. It was 95 million. That's a big amount for a 31-year-old. So, hey, if it doesn't work out, look, Bayern doesn't make, very poor signings. I think obviously Sadio Mane was kind of a outlier. They don't really make bad signings. They're a very structured club who send out great scouts. But for them to sign a player like Harry Kane and for them not to win the league or not to win a couple of trophies would be a huge disappointment for them. Now, on the other hand, obviously, big talking points. Union Berlin, was it a fluke season? Kind of looking like it right now, sitting 13th with only 6 points. But my biggest story is Leverkusen. Although he's not on, any top of the leaderboards or anything, I have to shout out my boy. Ray knows, my love for him. He had a terrible injury, of course. That's Florian Wirtz, who I think deserves a move out of the Bundesliga and kind of show his talents elsewhere. But no, I think clubs like Leverkusen, Eintracht Frankfurt, they consistently pump out talent, much like Dortmund does. It just seems like across the Bundesliga, apart from Bayern, they are a cesspool of talents, and teams are gonna look for the Bundesliga to kind of pick their talent now, much like they do in every other league. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't earn himself a move soon.
Yeah, of course, one of those main players at Leverkusen, and the reason why they started so well, even though he's only had 1 goal and 3 assists so far in the Bundesliga. We can all agree, Leverkusen look by far one of the best teams in the competition. Even though we have Bayern as expected for them to sort of challenge, haven't lost a single game, and of course tied second for the least goals conceded. And it's a breath of fresh air how Alonso has them going, and sort of the different styles of play that they can even employ in Bundesliga matches and in sort of I think it's Europa League matches as well that they're involved in. I've seen them compete with a number of different sort of lineup selections, so I'm interested to see how Xabi Alonso will do, considering that he has a lot of eyes on him in the near future for another move away from the club, if that's what happens. But Mac, anything that you would want to point out or highlight from the Bundesliga so far this season?
I do want to quickly give my thoughts on Bayer Leverkusen. It's a little bit. I love Ray talking about Xabi Alonso and having a different job, because he definitely would be, I guess, maybe a lot of Liverpool fans, semi dark horse favorite pick to potentially place Klopp in the near future, considering how he's taken to management thus far. 2 players that I want to be able to bring up, one selfishly and one just pure honest in terms of thoughts on. Will be very interesting to see what happens with his career. Granit Xhaka, my guy, doing the business, top of the league.
Sure.
He's comfortable there. Okay, leadership, love it. Always a fan. Never had any doubts about him. However, a little bit more honestly, to go for Jermaine Frimpong, who plays fullback for Bayer Leverkusen on the right hand side, I think he himself is going to have a lot of eyes looking at him to move into maybe. I don't want to say a bigger club because they are first in Bundesliga, but he would not be surprised for me as a player that's picked off in the near future, given his age, given his profile, a pace wide back that's able to create a lot of opportunities, and seems to have kind of skill to go along with it. So I would not be surprised if he's picked off from one of these Manchester United teams or goes over to a team, upper tier team in La Liga, maybe to replace a Danny Carvajal. A player like that, I would not be surprised, given how well he's played thus far this year. And how quickly he's kind of acclimated to, being at the top of the Bundesliga. So that's my thoughts on Bayer Leverkusen. But I do want to touch in regards to, I guess, it might be too early to say a crisis with Bayern Munich because, again, realistically, they're going to win the Bundesliga. Let's all of our cards on the table. Even if they don't have the points tally to finish first, they'll figure out a way to finish first. If it's like, paying off refs or, doing what they do. Who knows? I don't know. It just always seems to happen. But I think that that team right now, if you look across the team sheet, there was a time period where you were like, okay, we're looking to be able to get the previous generation out of the team. But it hasn't gone so well thus far. And I'm very curious to see if there's kind of a reorientation where under Tuchel, again, it towards the end of last year, it didn't go so well under Nagelsmann. It ended off very poorly, even though he, in my opinion, wasn't given enough time to be able to take the reins there properly. I think that they still have only kind of a couple players left over from that previous era. If it be a Mueller, Neuer is injured, so he hasn't really played, and Joshua Kimmich as well. Those are probably the only, I guess, layovers, really, in my opinion, that were part of the key members of the squad. But that next generation coming up, other than Musiala, I have large questions of where they're going to be 3 years from now, where there doesn't seem to have the same type of stability that this team used to have. So again, very interested to see. I hope they don't win it just because I want something different. I'm bored. I want to see that team kind of blown up, reshuffle the deck a little bit. I know they just got Harry Kane. That's exciting for 7 people that understand what Harry Kane says, but other than that, nothing really changed for me. So it's interesting to see, but I think there's still a lot of questions before I figure out, I guess, where everything's going to, how the cookie's really going to crumble in Bundesliga.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people are still expect Bayern Munich to eventually painfully and eventually at the end of the season win the Bundesliga. But so far, could we have another fairy tale story with, of course, Stuttgart finding themselves in second place so far, and one of their star players leading the goals category so far this season, and that's, of course, Seru Guirassy. He has 13 goals in 7 games so far in the Bundesliga, and that is just simply crazy. I don't think we've really ever seen anything like that sort of in the Bundesliga in sort of our lifetimes. And I guess just to point that out and sort of our brief periods watching Bundesliga, it's definitely the record, as he finally overtook Robert Lewandowski's record of 11 goals in both the 2019, 2020, and 2020 and 2021 seasons for number of goals at this point in the Bundesliga. So, of course, Stuttgart having the leading goal scorer in the league and also the leading assister with Chris Führich. That's interesting to see as well. I don't necessarily expect Stuttgart to continue this run of form, but that's something interesting to see. Guirassy, I did watch the 13 goals that he scored so far. Looks like a typical number 9. He's going to give you trouble in the box, but a lot of his finishes have been quite tidy. 27 years old, the Ghanaian international could be if only he was a couple years younger, could be sort of the next big thing, but likely if he does get another move outside of the German league, could be back to the French league, which he's sort of been back and forth in. And so not necessarily expecting a huge move for him, a huge money move for him, but someone that a lot of teams that could be sort of battling to get into Europa League spots or even Champions League spots could use for. So that's someone that we'll definitely keep out in our sights on in the near future. But also wanted to quickly discuss Borussia Dortmund. I guess, Joe, just to throw it back to you, Dortmund not the hottest start. 5 wins, 2 losses so far. They are, of course, expected as always to challenge Bayern Munich in the league all the way towards the end, but do you think they have it this season, considering they have lost Jude Bellingham and sort of the level that they have coming through in the squad at this moment doesn't stand out? No one really stands out apart from, of course, Marco Reus is still there and I think is still the captain of the club. Nothing really stands out from them so far. What do you think of their, I guess, expectations for the season?
To be quite honest, I think if I'm Borussia Dortmund, I'm very comfortable with where I am right now. Sitting at 4th, 17 points. One win puts them at the top, so it's not really, danger by any means. You're in the Champions League spot. It's early on in the season. I think, come mid-season, there's going to be a standout player for Dortmund, and teams are going to be eyeing that player as well, much like they do every year. I think, again, what we always fail to overlook is, we always overlook is that Dortmund plays in a very good system and consistently, consistently does play in that system where the ball's constantly moving. A lot of people get touches on the ball. They're not very stagnant. Yes, they have dips in their season, but for the majority of the season, they are consistently in that title race talk. Them sitting at 4th, I don't think they're too worried. They never really relied too heavily on star power to really get where they are. They develop players, and I think they'll do much of the same. It's the same old, same old. They'll be in contention for sure.
Yeah, of course. The likes of Füllkrug, Sebastian Haller, very, very seasoned veterans in the Bundesliga can definitely put in their sort of contributions for goals. And of course, you have the likes of Mukoko, Adeyemi, Julian Brandt, amongst some of the more, I guess, experienced players, even though they are quite young. And of course, you have your Bino Gittins coming through, and so a lot of those players will be eventually, I think, looked to be sold for a profit, as the Borussia Dortmund sort of strategy is, and so hopefully they can continue and push, those top teams for Champions League position, considering the fact that they have a loss and a tie in their group stage Champions League so far this season, not liking their chances to get out of their group and compete in sort of the knockout stages for the Champions League this season. So I'm hoping that they can sort of put all their eggs in the basket of pushing for the highest position they can finish in the league. And yeah, maybe we'll have another big money move for some of those rising stars that they have coming through. So definitely something else to keep an eye out for. But this pretty much wraps up our podcast for today, guys. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Monday when we discuss the David Beckham documentary that recently came out on Netflix. And of course, that's something exciting for all of us. I think Gio and Mac, you guys already finished it, so for sure it's something that I'm going to be getting through in the next couple of days. But until then, Mac, thank you for joining us.
I still don't like United, even though the documentary was good, but we'll talk about it.
Okay, thank you, Gio.
Peace out, guys.
See you guys soon.